Barack Obama claims that he was misinterpreted in that New York Times article where he talked about how you shouldn't be way out there trying to get all sorts of different stuff. I think the first piece that was written about it, I think, sort of mischaracterized it. But the second one, which was, I think, gave a little more clarity, I think was just as problematic. And now there's a piece in Politico talking about his desire to step on, here it is, about Barack Obama, that he's been hanging back, but back when Sanders seemed like more of a threat than he does now, Obama said privately that if Bernie were running away with the nomination, Obama would speak up to stop him. That's very sweet of him.
A threat to what, I want to know?
Well, I think he seemed like more of a threat in terms of electorally. Now,
he's a disciple of Farrakhan. This is anti-Semitism. I'm learning my Warren techniques right now.
And you know, we'll talk about Bloomberg. I'm not we will talk about Bloomberg later in the program, but I'm not quite convinced that isn't part of Bloomberg's agenda. I mean, usually you go into these situations and it's never about necessarily one thing. You assess various different scenarios, and if the majority of them work out, at least in as you perceive as a net positive, then maybe you do something. So I think Mike Bloomberg has sort of like multi-tiered reasons for entering the race, of course, starting with his ego. But here's another guy who's back from the dead, and talk about a smooth forehead controversy. Here is Rahm Emanuel.
Oh, wow, yeah.
He is on ABC's This Week, and he is there to be the voice of the most hated man in the Democratic Party. I really don't know that there is, well, I think that's probably an overstatement. By the most hated man, perhaps by the left wing of the Democratic Party. From day one, this guy saw it as his job as stymieing progressives' influence within the Obama administration and upon the Obama administration. And so, of course, he's the one who comes and speaks for Democrats and really mischaracterizes, I think, the entire Democratic Party project since the early 20th century. Here is Rahm Emanuel.
Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders credit. They brought their A game to the policy debate. There is a history from the New Deal to the New Frontier to the New Covenant President Clinton to the One America under President Obama of respecting the value of work, shared responsibility, equal access to opportunity. And the fact is, free income, free college, guaranteed health care has walked away from the traditional value system that Democrats, the traditional liberal system, going from Roosevelt backwards. Look, Social Security, payroll tax. Medicare, payroll tax. Earned income tax credit is based on work. AmeriCorps under President Clinton is value of service to country. And that traditional argument, both Deval Patrick, Mike Bloomberg, and Barack Obama, notice have not spoken up, and all the other candidates have got to bring their A game, like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have, to the policy debate.
Yeah, this is stunning. First of all, this is a total fabrication. You can go back. There's a speech by John Kennedy about the idea of Medicare for all. You can go back to Truman era when they were trying to get a Medicare for all. I don't know if they called it Medicare for all, but health care for everyone. This is just absurd. The idea that free college is sort of some type of new idea. Go ask your parents. Go ask their parents about a free university.
Was free until very recently.
I mean, you had it in many, many states around the country, and state colleges were always heavily discounted, if not free.
FDR, the third of the four freedoms, is freedom from want.
I mean,
globally, by the way, not in that speech, not even just the United States, everywhere.
The idea.
Harvey K. would throttle Rahm Emanuel.
I mean, but really, any full-on Democrat should throttle him. The idea that the earned income tax is part of Democratic values, it was a Republican plan adopted by his boss. This is just bizarre. It's bizarro world. I don't know what George Stephanopoulos did after that, but I'm quite sure he didn't push back on it. Maybe Chris Christie stood up and said, no, well, wait a second. That's not right, Rahm. But it's just bizarre. It's bizarre the lengths in which they're going to go. And so there's a lot more coming forward with this. And, when I look at we have questions like, why is Deval Patrick? And we talked about this with Perrine on Friday. Why is Deval Patrick in the race? Why is Mike Bloomberg in the race? I think a lot of it is as much for them to win the nomination, or perhaps even more than for them to win the nomination, than to prevent the most left candidates in the race from winning. I mean, I think that's just basically the reality. And what's also interesting here is, and I guess maybe this can be taken as a positive, you're not hearing as much as we have in the past. They can't win in the general. And yeah,
because they have no data to support that.
That's true. And I think it's not just that they have no data to support it, that there's like overwhelming understanding that that's not the case. Because even if they didn't have data, they would still sort of float that idea. But they know they can't. And so they're actually going to try and rewrite the entire history of the Democratic Party and say that it's inconsistent with the Democratic Party to provide a free option of higher education, or to provide government-supported health insurance. I mean, this is just bizarre. It's bizarre, and
well,
but
it relies on people having a very short historical memory.
Yes, and that is actually a fairly decent bet to make, folks.